So representing Shoe is Hot, we have TzKal-Zook, the horrifying monster.
Zook. Zook. Nah.
Hello everyone. Today we're taking a look at TzKal-Zook, the final member of Team Shoe is Hot. For the competition rules, we could have one Juggernaut Zook with a component limit of 100 instead of 35, and TzKal-Zook is that Juggernaut, and it took on a primarily strength-based role. TzKal-Zook only had two primary contests, and those were Weakest Zook and Zook Sumo. These contests have a lot in common, which lets us build a very specialised Zook. So, what's required? Firstly, strength. This is no surprise and by far the most important requirement, since we're pitting our Zook directly against the strength of the opponents. Good contact is also important, with both the opponent's Zook in Sumo and the pushy thing in Weakest Zook. We want to make the most of our strength, and we certainly don't want to lose because a weaker Zook managed to get out of the way. Finally, good turning or control can also help. This is related to good contact. We want our Zook to focus its efforts in the right direction. Unlike every other role, speed isn't actually required here, as neither of the primary contests are races. But it's worth bearing in mind that we don't want our Zook to be boring to watch, and we may also want it to be a backup for some other contests. The most important thing to make a Zook strong is weight, and we've added a lot to TzKal-Zook. Most of its body parts that aren't legs are 12 by 12 by 12 to get the most weight out of each part. And many of these parts are here simply to add extra weight and nothing else. You'll also notice that most of them are square, and this is for good reason. Despite what the Zook passport may imply, round parts are lighter than square parts, and pointy parts are also lighter, which is why most of the parts added here are plain old cubes. Even the legs play a part in adding weight, so let's take a look at them. They're quite an unusual shape, being quite thick, short, and very tall. And this is just to add a bit of extra weight, while otherwise performing pretty much the same. And when you have so many legs, this extra weight from each of them combines to make quite a decent chunk. Now, if adding weight to the legs is an advantage, you may be wondering, can you just make the legs 12 by 12 by 12 to get the most out of them? And the answer is actually yes, but you need to make them move very slow to give the Zook any sort of stability. So this is a good option if you need to make the most of your components and you're absolutely sure the Zook is only going to take on Weakest Zook and Sumo. A good example of this is this thing by Pingu. Aside from weight, grip plays an important role. For strong Zooks, single part legs are generally preferable to two part legs. The main reason being, given a component limit, you can have twice the number of legs pushing your Zook forwards, as well as supporting the Zook's heavy body. And it's no surprise we've added a lot of legs to TzKal-Zook. I kept the legs fairly short, as shorter legs have better leverage for supporting the Zook. And finally, the leg's motion. Once again, we've added extra IK points, so the legs stay on the ground for longer. This may have been overkill, however, given how many legs we have. But it's up to you whether you want to sacrifice some speed for extra grip. The first thing to watch out for is the ground clearance. We don't want a weaker Zook beating us because it managed to scoop under our Zook and compromise its grip. The leg shape helps us with this. Since they start completely horizontal, only the motion contributes to the ground clearance, so it's easy to keep it pretty low. We also don't want the opponent's Zook avoiding a head-to-head collision by going to the side or even on top of ours. TzKal-Zook's naturally large frame helps here. The spikes, aside from looking cool, can also help here by creating a sort of catchment area and can also bury under Zooks that drift to the side. One thing to watch out for is you don't want your Zook to lead with a single spike that can make it liable to sway side to side in weakest Zook. One last thing is having the legs close together and evenly spread. In the event of a side-on collision, we don't want the two Zooks getting tangled, which can lead to unpredictable outcomes, and this arrangement minimises the chance of that happening. We want our Zook to be able to turn around quickly to face a Zook should it go to the side, so for this reason it has quite sharp turning. One possible issue with sharp turning is the Zook spinning out of control because of the angular momentum it built up. But this isn't a problem for TzKal-Zook, thanks to its very high grip. One possible issue with sharp turning, however, is the Zook turning when it doesn't need to. For example, if the opponent has drifted slightly to the side and pushing forwards would still be fine. This can also be a problem in weakest Zook. A little known fact about it is the targets they follow sway to the left and right slightly. If a Zook attempts to turn because of this, it will lose a lot of pushing power as one side of its legs slows down. This is only likely to affect your Zook if it has very sharp turning, but still worth bearing in mind. The biggest drawback of a dedicated strong Zook was always going to be speed, so the only real rounding I did for TzKal-Zook was making it faster than it could have been. I said earlier that the leg shape was to add weight, but really they were designed from the perspective of, given some very chunky legs, how do I reshape them to be more agile while retaining weight where possible? There are definitely other shapes that could work well, flat and wide for example, but I thought the tall legs were a novel shape and had the benefit of being very easy to align. I chose not to add any extra ground clearance, as I thought this would compromise its sumo ability too much, even if it could have gained some hurdling ability. Being slow but nigh unstoppable with good cornering made TzKal-Zook a great backup for many contests, being able to reliably complete most of them, albeit slowly. It was notably good at Zook Ball, which should be no surprise given its size. It was also good at getting clean runs of ready steady Zook, thanks to its turning, which is quite amusing given this contest is usually reserved for smaller, delicate Zooks. One contest it was technically the best at was Merry-Go Zook. It's so heavy that it weighs the turntable down to the point that it scrapes the floor, so it can't build up speed, meaning TzKal-Zook can stay on pretty much indefinitely. This isn't really in the spirit of the contest though, which is why I didn't have it as a first choice. Really, I shouldn't have had it as a choice at all. TzKal-Zook took one of the only losses in the competition, so it's worth addressing. It lost a round of Zook Cubes versus Ali Uber from Basketball Superstars team the basketball superstar. TzKal-Zook was a third choice, and with Basketball Superstars team being technically the most well-rounded team, all members were Ali Uber, it was a nightmare matchup for me. TzKal-Zook could handle the cubes fine, it's just speed that was the issue. Which raises the question, should I have made TzKal-Zook faster? And the answer is probably yes. Despite some efforts to make it faster, it was still slow and was a pretty glaring weakness for a lot of the contests it was being used as a backup for. It would have been pretty easy to speed up too. Just making the legs a bit longer and removing the IK points would have made a significant impact. But this would have the consequence of losing its tight cornering. When heavy Zooks like this move faster, they can be difficult to control with the huge momentum they build up. There was one option to remedy this though, and that was adding extra legs to compensate. I talked a bit about component economy, making the most of the parts you have available, but I didn't even make use of the full component limit, not even close. Part of the reason for this was I didn't want to add an extra segment. This would give less breathing room in sumo and weakest Zook. And I didn't want to cram extra weights or legs onto the existing body. It just felt complete as is. But if I was really trying my best to win, I would have used the extra components to try and make TzKal-Zook faster while still retaining its grip and turning, which probably would have required a lot of legs, but I had a lot of components to spare. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to check out TzKal-Zook for yourself, you can find and download it on zooklabs.com.